Y'all, we're running a little late. It's my fault, but that's okay. So I have my guest in the building. I'm gonna let her introduce herself. Please tell me your name and where you're from.
So my name is Heather Henley, and I am originally from Gary, Indiana.
Ooh, Tyra's from Gary. Okay,
So
okay.
GI's in the house. And so I am a master crisis therapist.
Okay, what's that?
So that is an individual who has just specialized or studied crisis.
Okay.
And so I've been doing crisis therapy for 20 years.
Ooh.
Yes.
So is that more of like suicidal? You get a call, or how does that kind of work? If you can elaborate a little bit.
So I can get calls. It just depends. A lot of my clients have tons of behavior. So it might be self-injurious behaviors. It might be physical aggression. It might be suicide ideations, homicide ideations. The list can go to property destruction, verbal aggression. I work on social skills, sexual issues, sexual problems, or sexually maladaptive behaviors. So just a little bit of everything.
Okay. So different things that you do, is it just people call, or do you go out, or?
So I go out to visit them in the homes.
Okay.
Yes. And so it just depends on the clients that I have.
Okay.
Based on referrals that comes in through the state.
Nice. So, oh my goodness, I've never heard that before.
Yes.
So
there are they're called behavioral specialists or behavioral consulting.
Okay.
So it just depends. But this group of professionals, we work with individuals whose IQs are below 60.
Okay.
So they would have special needs. And our clients technically could be in a institution. However, the institutions here in the state of Indiana, the majority of them have closed down. We have a couple. So we have Richmond State Hospital, but they're full. We do have Logansport, but they're full. Mm-hmm. And typically, when our clients need some type of immediate care, they may go to Valley Vista or maybe Community
North.
Yes, behavioral unit, Eskenazi. So we do have different facilities that are out there that are trying to work with our clients who may need some extra supports.
I used to do that. Well, not what you do, but I used to work in the home. So I used to work special needs. That's how we used it. I was like, okay. They just maybe have different titles for it. But yes, I used to do that.
Absolutely.
I used to do that. So
definitely.
Yeah, it's awesome.
So that's what I do. I've been doing it for a long time, 20 years.
Nice.
And because I specialize in working with individuals with crisis, so typically any type of traumatic experience is going to be considered a crisis. Okay. And so my agency has contracts with the Department of Child Services, so we provide services to families who are in need, and typically they're in crisis.
So something has happened.
Yes.
Okay. Something major.
Something major has happened.
So,
definitely.
So I heard you wrote a book.
I did write a book.
I heard you write a book. So what's
I did. So my book is called I Am an Orange, Uncompromisingly. And so what I do is I use the analogy of an orange because an orange has endured quite a bit, and it can endure quite a bit. So I use the characteristics of an orange to talk about the characteristics of individuals, and just how the different things that we endure in life, we can compare those to actually the life of an orange.
Okay.
And so that's what the book about, just allowing you to use your past adversities, past traumas that you might have experienced, and allowing that to push you into destiny. So the things that you endure is a process for purpose.
Okay.
For the most part.
Okay.
So that's what the book is talking about.
So is this book on your personal life, or is it?
It is a combination. It is my personal life. I use a lot of clinical techniques in terms of trying to bring your junk to the surface, which is my motto. Because I'm so crisis driven, when I did my intern in Los Angeles, California on Skid Row, We did something called short-term dynamic therapy. I was trained through UCLA and Pepperdine psychologists while I was there. And they use short-term dynamic therapy, which you would have to kind of think of an emergency room for psychiatric. So if you think about an emergency room, when individuals come in emergencies, different things that are going on, they go to the emergency room, right? Same rules would apply. And so in Los Angeles, California, they have a ordinance which allows them to be homeless. And so a lot of them are coming from prison, they're homeless, and it's a lot of psychiatric mental illness there. And so what happens is the short-term dynamic therapy, you are given 1 session to 6 to be able to de-escalate the crisis. So you have to, because you may not ever see them again. So
that's a short amount of time.
It's a short amount of time
to get a lot done.
And you
so is it very? So it's intense. Okay.
It's extremely intense.
Okay.
So you might only have one time to see them because they're homeless. They may come in off the street. They may have tried to kill themselves. It could just be a whole lot of things going on. And so you have to be able to de-escalate, find out what the problem is, and try to solve it quickly because you may never see them again. But the goal is that they at least get stabilized to move to the next place.
So how do you unwind from all that?
Well,
and go home.
So I probably don't unwind, which is my concern.
A big concern. Okay.
Because when you are doing crisis, you are you're processing, number one, all the time, and you are always in a mode of fight. A lot of times when we're talking about crisis or even psychology period, we have this fight or flight mode.
Okay.
And so it produces hormones in your body, which is some of those corticosteroids that we produce. Okay, so I'm in fight or flight all the time. Just like someone that might be in trauma. So your adrenaline is up all the time because everything is always a crisis. So I am, because I've been doing it for so long, anytime a situation arrives, I'm automatically, okay, how can I problem solve? What's the replacement behavior? What can I do differently? How can I change the situation?
How does that not drive you crazy? And you are married.
I am.
And you have kids.
I do.
How does that not drive you completely insane? And them in return.
Well, so they're used to it now. It definitely can be a struggle, because I bring my work home. When you are a 24-hour crisis, which means that they call you all the time. That's the purpose of the position. You're 24 hours. So if they call you at 2:00 in the morning and you can catch your phone, you're answering, hi, this is Heather. What can I do? What's the problem? What's going on? So
your phone rings.
Yes.
Hours.
And actually, this past Friday, my phone broke. Yes. It completely froze and shut down to the point where it would not come back on. So I just got a new phone on Monday afternoon.
So that was the only vacation? Seems like that's the only vacation.
Yes.
Okay.
It is hard sometimes to, take vacations. But I'm working on it. I just turned 46.
Okay.
I don't look past 28 though.
Okay.
But I just turned 46. So I'm definitely working on doing some relaxation and some rest time for me and just trying to change how I do things, because I am like what you see, I'm at 100 all day long. Even when I go to bed, I'm at 100.
How do you sleep?
Well, sometimes I have to take some medication to help me to kind of have my mind go off.
Okay.
Because I'm always processing and I'm always trying to figure out what's the next step, what's the next thing, what can I do to make the situation better. So I'm always processing.
Wow. So I know I kind of was scoping you out a little bit.
Oh.
And I see that you're a domestic violence.
I am.
Okay.
I am. So, and I kind of talk about that in my book too.
Okay.
Definitely. I was in a 10 or 11 year relationship with my daughter's father, actually. And so I was in college, I got pregnant. So, This is the second baby with no father. So, you try to make it work. You're like, oh my God, I got to make it work.
It has to work.
It got to work. And so, you keep secrets. And then, me being my personality is so dominant, is so strong, of course, everybody's like, are you kidding me? Like, how do you go through that? So it causes you sometimes to feel embarrassed or shameful, but it happens. And, just thinking back, some of my friends that know the two of us, the telltale signs were there. You say, it won't happen to me. He'll never do that to me until he does it. You just have to make him mad enough. Or a traumatic experience has to happen for him, or her, for you to
see that other side.
Yes, for it to be exhibited. And I tell individuals all the time, when you're in relationships and when you're dating, the relationship is not final until you see them mad. You need to know how they respond when they are frustrated, when they're upset, when things are not going well for them. Do they shut down? Do they, self-isolate? Do they go and drink, smoke? Are they out, having risky behaviors? You want to know, how do they respond when frustrated? That is big. And so typically what you see is kind of what you get, unless, they find some other way to get help, which would be some deliverance. Deliverance is important. But yeah, so I experienced that, and my kids as well. It was pretty traumatic. Because when it was time for me to go and do my intern, I left my children with him. So, sometimes they don't just, verbally and physically abuse the mother, but sometimes we don't look at things appropriately at times.
So how long did you stay in that relationship?
I was with him probably 10 years. And, sometimes I sit back and be like, Heather, what were you thinking about? If I was to give an example, I was thinking about one of my friends the other day, because in my field of what I do, I work with domestic violence. Domestic violence is big for me, and I actually want a shelter. Because we sometimes feel that we need to stay, and we keep secrets because, I could never tell my father because he would kill him, right? Okay, so, you never can tell anybody until you're probably done, and then you're still kind of embarrassed. Yes, but, he used to go, because he had his own issues or whatever he was dealing with, he would, tear up my whole apartment like a Tasmanian devil. And I never really kind of processed it. I would just be like, oh my God, he's just having such a hard time. Why? Because I'm a helper. I'm a server. It's natural for me to always want to help because I'm a therapist, that I want to help. How can I fix it? I want to fix the problem. I think I can fix him. I think I can make it work. I think I can make it happen for him. That just was not the case. It just wasn't. And so, but I stayed because I thought I could fix it, because that's what I do. I fix everything. And for me, it was like a failure. So it's all in how you look at things. For me, I had never given up on anything. I got pregnant at 20, and I was like, I refuse to go back to Gary, Indiana. It's not going down. So I stayed at school. I did whatever I had to do to get my first degree in 1998, but I graduated in 91. So for me, it was like a failure. I've not failed at anything. I just kept pushing hard. I was so resilient. And, it takes you to places where you don't want to go sometimes. There was plenty of times where I felt that I just didn't want to live anymore. So along with all of that, that you endure, that you take on, because you are trying to be so strong, because, we're built to be strong. African American women, we're supposed to be strong. We're supposed to be able to handle it and do everything that we know to do.
Failure is not an option.
It is so not an option.
It is not an
and
option.
So for me, it was a failure. Why? Because this was my second child out of wedlock. So
you just had to.
I felt that I had to endure it. You know, and then I got to that point because I already was depressed and, low. When individuals, even though in your mind you think it, but when they tell you that, you're not anything, nobody's going to want you,
I start believing it.
You believe it. I had 2 kids. My weight was up and down all over the place. Sometimes I thought I was pretty. The other times I didn't think I was pretty, and so you just settle and you just be in a broken place because everything is broken, And so you're in your mind, you're just like, I can handle it. I'll just take what I got. Because I didn't think anything was going to be better at the time, than what I had.
You just thought that was...
Yes, I thought that this is what it is. We're going to work with it, and we're going to keep it pushing. Because that was always my motto. We're going to keep it pushing.
So can I ask, did you have dad issues?
So...
How was your relationship with your dad?
Okay, so... That's interesting. So I'm a daddy's girl.
Okay.
However, because my dad experienced trauma as a child, it was hard, even though he was there. I never heard him tell me he loved me until I was a grown woman. Because his way of showing love was by going to work and putting food on the table and not leaving my mother and staying there and taking care of us. And so that was his way of showing love, but I didn't realize that. And he worked all the time. So he was present, but he wasn't present.
Okay.
So he was there, but he wasn't. I think, I sang because I love to sing.
Okay.
I think he came to one performance ever in my whole entire life.
Wow.
One. I ran track. I never saw him at a track meet. I never saw him at any type of kind of activities.
Wow.
Because he worked all the time.
Well, we have a caller, and my mama is not going to call on the regular number like she is supposed to, Kim Kent. You're supposed to call on the regular number if you want to give your 2 cents, ma'am.
I don't know the regular number.
But go ahead, you on. This is my mama, y'all.
I'm so happy of what she just said. It is so much more being a father than paying the bills. My father, I love him to pieces, and we have a wonderful relationship now. But growing up, I missed that father and daughter relationship. My father would tell us we should automatically know that I love you. I go to work every day. I provide for you guys, this, that, the other. But as a child, it's so important to hear parents actually voice it that I love you, I'm proud of you, even when children make their parents mad.
Absolutely.
We still have to be able to give that affirmation that I love you, I'm proud of you, I'm in your corner, and that kind of thing. So thank you for saying that, because it's so much more to being a father than just being in the house under the same roof.
Absolutely. And
All right, Mom, keep watching.
The one thing that I definitely want to say, when we are just talking about mothers or fathers, if we're going to be transparent, because my father didn't have a father, I can't expect him to love me how God says that I'm supposed to be loved if he really doesn't know. So in his mind, his way of showing the love, which he did, was by giving and giving us, making sure we had the things that we need, and making sure we had a roof over our head. And, I can remember my sister, we were up the street playing one day and she fell and my dad came up the street with a gun. He was going to hurt the person that hurt us. So he showed the love the best way that he could. But as a female, I still needed a different type of love. I still needed to hear it, even though he was showing it to me the best way that he knew how.
I had to, I talk about it a lot on the show. I had to go through, this year I had to forgive my dad. And y'all, that had to be the toughest because I didn't get an apology. I didn't get none of that. And that had to be the toughest thing to deal with and go through.
Mm-hmm.
And stuff was still going on. So he was still doing things, different things, you know. So
Mm-hmm.
it was just like, how am I supposed to forgive this person? Like, you know, and he's still kind of pushing my buttons. Like, he's testing my gangster. He's still pushing my buttons.
Yeah.
But, you know, I had to learn, you know, just different things. And I did a show about forgiveness and forgiving my dad. And I talked to some of my aunts and uncles because I really wanted to understand my grandfather. Because I've heard different things about him. And from what I heard, you know, he was a good guy. I heard he was a very good guy. He had his faults and he had issues. But he was, you know, he was very, he had this big personality. He was very smart. He was educated. But I heard that he liked to drink. I heard that he wasn't as loving or as just different things involving how my dad maybe grew up, and that he maybe needed more. And that kind of helped me a little bit because I had to look in the mirror and I had to see Dominique being broken. But I also had to see my dad and that being that scared little boy who just never grew up. And that kind of helped me. It didn't get it all done, I'll tell you that. But it kind of helped me with dealing with my dad and seeing him as that hurt boy that was very angry. And, you know, there was domestic violence issues in my household with my mother and my father. And it went on with my grandparents. But from what I heard with my grandfather, he liked to lay hands. That's what I say. He liked to lay hands. But from what I heard, my grandma didn't take no laying of the hands. My grandma didn't go out without a fight. Right. So I heard that Skillet was not having that. That's what we got. My grandma was Skillet. Skillet wasn't having that. So I had to look at different relationships. That's why I asked. I had to look at different relationships in my life. And I've never been hit before, but it seems like I've dated some guys that are just like my father. They mimic my dad.
Because you come from like that. So when you're thinking about just relationships or any type of nurturement, the environment that you come from is what you see. So although you say, oh my God, I don't want anybody, I want them to have some of the characteristics, but not all. You know, but your father is your first love. He's actually really your first love. And so everything that you see comes through that little scope. So if what you are feeling or seeing, or what you are being given from the parent, which I talk about that in my book, that's my first chapter, In Trust. That is the person who you give the power and authority to, because that's what interest means, to give somebody power, authority over. And so your parents is the first individuals who you trust, who you give everything to. They deposit in you. You begin to be made and molded and sculpted from the scope that you see them. And so although you say, oh God, I'm not going to get anybody that's remotely like my father, not so, because it's familiar. So you're going to be attracted to what you are used to until you become whole. That's where that whole forgiveness comes in. So then when you become whole, how you looked at things is going to change because the perception is going to be different. Yeah,
and, you know, in forgiving my dad, I had to look at some of the things with Dominique. And I had to really understand, first of all, I don't have it all. I can't expect my dad to be perfect, and I'm not, you know. So I had to really understand. I had to look in the mirror at Dominique. And it didn't make an excuse for some of the stuff that happened.
Absolutely.
There was no excuse for some stuff that happened when I was a kid, or, you know, even in the adult life, whatever has happened. It doesn't make an excuse for it, but it did help me better understand my father and get some sort of compassion for him. Just a little bit of compassion for him. So, which I did not have. I had no compassion for him. My dad has real bad heart issues, and his heart stopped on him. And they had to shock him. Okay. And since he wasn't married, I was supposed to be at the hospital because I'm supposed to make the decision, because I don't even think they were going to be able to do surgery on him. Okay. It was very serious, and I didn't go to the hospital. It was so bad, my mom, his ex-wife, went, and I didn't go. Okay. And I was at that point, I knew I was very angry. I was still very upset. And to to have a decision like that and I not even show up.
Mm-hmm.
So I had to really do a lot of soul searching in Dominique, and it was, I'm more like David than what I like to admit.
Yeah.
I'm more like my father than what I like to admit, you know,
Mm-hmm.
from my temper. And it's not as bad as what it used to be, but from my temper on to, like I said, some of the men I've dated, thinking, and I had to start really changing my mind, because when you change your mind, you know, you can change your life by changing the way you think about things.
Absolutely.
I'm a firm believer in that. So I had to really start looking at my life and where I'm at, and I had to start changing the way I think about a lot of things. Yeah, he cute. Yeah, he get mad, and yeah, he like to. Okay, no, that's not gonna work no more. It's no.
Right.
So I really had to come to those terms as far as in my journey. So that's why I thought I'd ask about your dad, because I know with me, my dad was a big part in a lot of what I went through this year.
Okay.
He was a big part in, you know, a lot of the issues and just a lot of things I went through. So that's why I thought I'd ask about your dad.
Okay, and it's not a problem. You know, the one thing that I love is that, you know, the things that we endure, it is a process for healing. So even though you had to experience that with your dad, that was your breaking moment to start your process so that you can be different, you know, so that you can look at things differently, so that you can change your perception. Because you have to be able to recognize and understand that he didn't just wake up like that. He was a child, you know, he was a child too. That's not making an excuse for him, because he still needs to be able to own and take accountability for his part when he became an adult, when you became aware, when you were old enough to understand, you know, that you've offended me, you've done something wrong. You have to be able to make different choices. So once we are alert and we are understanding, then that's when we have the obligation to come back and make some different choices and different changes. And so I love it that your mom said that her relationship is really good now, because my dad is the bomb. You know, I mean, even with everything that he's experienced and the things that he's went through, he's the coolest dad on the planet. You know, and I know that if I ever, even at 46, needed anything, that he got me. Because that was what he definitely knew that he could provide for us, is the stability and the stabilization that he could bring, because he may not have had that.
So I know we were talking about parents, and I know you are a parent.
I am.
And I know you said that your children, they were, you know, abused. How did you guys work through all that? How did that work?
You know, because as parents, I don't care how many books they write, it's still not good enough. It's just not good enough. And culturally, we all, you know, have different stories. And so what I had to do, because what I realized is that my children were broken, and they really were broken. And so I had to go to them and apologize for my behavior, for me thinking that what I was doing was correct, but the choices that I made indirectly affected them. Yeah. They directly affected me, but they indirectly affected my children. You know, if I was to use my son, for example, just how he sees love. And, you know, because of just things that had happened to me, he didn't even think I loved him, because I'd never told him. I couldn't hardly touch on him that much, you know. And so his processing and his thought process of love was so, skewed. It was just a complete distortion, you know, of love. And even at the age he is now, he's 25, he still, you know, struggles in terms of the affection and needing the affection, because his father is not there and he wasn't there. So I raised him as a single mother. And so because I was there and pursuing school, because failure was not an option. So I was a single mom. I went to school, you know, trying to make sure that I could provide him everything that he needed. I still didn't give him the love that he really needed. So again, I'm doing the same thing that my father did, right? I just didn't realize it, because in my mind was like, hey, I'm here too, but I still love on him. Because I told him I loved him, right? But I didn't show him the way that he needed to be shown the love, because we all have different personality temperaments, and so how you perceive love is different from how I perceive it. So I was giving him the love that I thought that he was supposed to have, but it just wasn't the right type of love. And so at one point, you know, he thought I didn't love him, and I was like, I tell you I love you all the time. What are you talking about? But he didn't feel it. It's a difference for me to say it than you to feel it. You know, some people be like, well, I bought you stuff. You know, I came to every game. I didn't miss school. I was the parent chaperone, right? See, that's the stuff that didn't happen for me. But that's not what he needed. I gave him what I needed, the stuff that I thought would be good for him, right? So I never missed every time the school needed a parent chaperone, I was there. I never missed anything that the school had.
Wow. So we have a question.
Sorry.
Yeah, so the question is, how does one manage emotional pain?
Good question. So in order for an individual to manage emotional pain, they need to be able to actually deal with that particular emotion, whatever the particular situation is at the time. Because when we're talking about emotions, typically we don't deal with them. We just, kind of brush it under the rug a little bit. So let's say, for example, let me give the example of, I was supposed to attend, let's say I was supposed to attend my daughter's, and this happened plenty of times. I was supposed to attend my daughter's, she went to North Central, she plays the cello. And she had this really, really big orchestra concert. And I promised her I was going to go, as I've done before, and didn't show up because I was working, right? At which my kids thought that my job and the clients that I serviced was more important than them, right? So I didn't show up, even though I said I was going to show up, and I promised, because mommies never break promises. So I promised her I was going to show up, and I did not show up. And so instead of me coming to her to acknowledge number one, she was disappointed, she was upset that yet again I told her I was coming and I didn't come. What I did was like, you'll be okay. I'll go to the next one. It's just an orchestra, I downplayed the whole thing. So what happens is, then she had rejection on top of rejection, just on top of rejection, because that's what it is. She's feeling rejected and abandoned. And then something so small happened, and she just completely lost it, like complete breakdown. And I'm looking like, okay, Pumpkin, what's going on with you? Like, I mean, hey, what's the problem? Why you tripping? Right? That's where I'm at. Why? Because we never dealt with the real emotion. So now we're in 5. Let's say we're in 5 years now, because she's in college. And after we've had a massive breakdown over something small like senior assassination. Let's talk about senior assassination. We have a complete breakdown where she's crying, manic all over the place. And I'm trying to get an understanding of what the problem is. But the real issue was that, Mom, I have asked you on several occasions to show up and you haven't. So when we're talking about emotional healing, we're talking about dealing with what the real issue is. Because a lot of times we allow issues to build up on top of each other, and then it's almost like a volcano. If a small pebble hit it explodes. And you're sitting there saying, sir, ma'am, what are you doing? I'm confused.
How did we get here?
What are you talking about? But the real issue was that I have abandoned and rejected you for the past 5 years. And we've never dealt with it. We've never talked about it. We've just piled things on top of it, and more things on top of it, and more things on top of it. So when you're talking about emotional healing, you have to be able to deal with the situation at hand at that moment. Okay. I hope that answered the question.
Wow. I don't think my mom understood how really, I think mothers know
Mm-hmm.
But I don't think my mother really knew how broken I really was until we were talking about I was dating this guy or whatever, and I said, well, I mean, ain't no point in getting serious with him. He's not gonna stay around anyways. And my mom said, what did you say? And I said it again, and at that point she seen how deep and I actually explained to her why I felt that way.
Mm-hmm.
And at that point was when she seen how deep my abandonment issues ran, when it dealt with men and when it dealt with my father, when it dealt with just people in general. She seen how deep those abandonment issues ran, and that was a tough conversation to have. And I don't really think she really understood until that point of me saying that, how really broken or how really hurt or how I really felt about my dad. She knew that there were issues. You know, mothers know. She knew there were issues, or I felt some type of way or whatever. But just because I didn't communicate it or whatever with her, it was until that comment came that she was like, okay, you really need some help.
Right.
You really need some help. And more help than what I can give you. So that I kind of get what you're saying on that.
Absolutely. We're trying to save the world, but sometimes we forget about the world that's at home. It happens.
That is very
all
true.
the time.
That's very true.
Good question. How do you deal with fears suffered as a child that have manifested as an adult?
So, that's a good question. So, in order to deal with fear that you suffered as a child that continues to manifest, we're going to talk about it and be transparent, that continues to manifest, you have to go back to infancy. You have to go back to the place where the fear first entered in. And you have to be able to deal with that. And so then once you deal with that, once you process that, once you look at that in the mirror, and you begin to tell it that it clearly has no control over you. Why? Because fear is a secret. The only way that something can paralyze you if it's a secret, if it's hidden. So when you actually begin to talk about the fear, then at that point, it no longer has that control or that power over you because you're dealing with it at that point. And so then as you begin to continue to matriculate in age, then the fear can kind of begin to subside because it's right here in front of you. Fear is usually hidden, right?
Okay.
Fear is always hidden. It's in the dark. But when you actually can bring it to the light and you talk about it, it then no longer has control over you.
It no longer has that power.
It has no power at that point. And that's why it's fear. And I talk about it in my book too. So which goes back to why my son felt that I didn't love him. I couldn't touch him. So, when I got sexually assaulted, I'm going to say, when I was 7. So one of my friends' fathers, put his hands in my pants, some things that he shouldn't have did to a 7-year-old, let's say that. And so there was a whole lot of issues going on. Number one, I snuck. I wasn't supposed to be up the street, I was supposed to be on the porch, but I snuck up the street to my friend's house because I wanted to see if she can come out and then come down the street. So you know how you do, you're 7. So I ran up the street real quick.
And you come outside.
Yes, and now, you want to, because I, want to knock on the door and be like, hey, can you come outside? And then if you come outside, I want you to come down the street. Okay, so her stepdad tells me to go. He was like, oh, you can come in, she's downstairs. Duh, now you know that your mama and your daddy, your daddy crazy. He had already told you not to go in nobody's house. So I did it anyway. I go downstairs in the basement, 7, you're not thinking. And he has me hemmed up against a little corner. And so as he has his hands in my pants and he is doing things with his fingers to my vagina area, I'm, petrified. And of course I call on Jesus because that's the only thing that I knew because I went to church all the time. And so anyway, he let me leave out the house and go. And so that changed my whole demo. And I was scared of everything at this point. Not to mention that I felt that because I was disobedient, like if you're disobedient, you're going to be punished.
So you couldn't.
So I felt like I was punished because I snuck up the street. And clearly I couldn't tell my dad, my mom, because they was going to whoop me. Because hey, we got whoopings. And so that's what I knew. I was like, oh, I ain't getting a whooping. Not today. I shouldn't have been up the street. And, oh my God, look at what he did to me. And so then I was like, then I'm going to get him in trouble. And so, you think all of these are thinking errors. So I had all of that going on. I dealt with all of that, never told a soul ever. And then I had a child. And so I was scared to touch him, clean him, wash him, because I thought if I even touched his penis, that I was touching him wrong, that I was inappropriate. Oh, it was all crazy. And this is what I was dealing with. So I couldn't touch him. I would tell him I love him. You know what I'm saying? I mean, I would, put his clothes on. I would just do all that, but it was difficult. Like my thoughts that were going on in my mind, even growing up, like, oh my God, would I like my son? I just was terrified, and I never told anybody, and I never liked to be touched, and I was mean. I didn't like people. Don't touch me. College was the worst. I mean, I was mean. I was violent. I was kicked out of elementary. I was kicked out of Holy Angels, which was like a Catholic school, because somebody said something to me. I just took my belt buckle off and busted her in her mouth. I was mean. And I was like, you'll never be able to touch me. And that was my guard. You know what I'm saying? Because I was like, I can't be violated again. Like, are you kidding me? And so that was what I grew up with. Just don't like a whole lot of people, didn't like to be touched. And so when I went to Purdue, that all changed, because there was a woman at the church that I was going to, and I say she would hug me every day to the point where I would just be like shaking, like a board. Like she would just, when I go to church, she would hug me and I'd be like, I don't like to be touched. Like, I don't like to be touched. Or like I would go to church, leave church, and hurry up and leave before church even got out. You know what I'm saying? Because I didn't want to have to interact. No, I didn't want to talk to nobody. I didn't want to interact. And so I just remember this one day. She hugged me, and all I know is I screamed. And I felt like my body was melting like butter. Like when you put butter in a skillet, and I just fell to the ground, screaming and hollering to the top of my lungs, like somebody was doing something to me.
You were screaming for that little girl.
I was screaming for the 7-year-old little girl. And when I say I screamed, oh my God, I screamed and screamed and screamed. And so when I got up, I just wasn't even the same person. And at that point, I felt relief, but I still was so broken that I didn't even know what to do. You know what I'm saying? And so I found myself so many times sitting in Walmart's parking lot, 2 a.m, and my kids were at home, and I was going to leave. And people were just talking me off the ledge because I just couldn't handle a whole lot of things. I remember calling my parents like, you better come get them, because this is not for me. I don't know what you're going to do, and because I'm leaving. Like, having to be talked off the ledge so many times. But I'm grateful to God that he saw fit to deliver me, and that people were able to pour into me so that I could change, how I looked at things, and so that I could have forgiveness and healing. And, when my mind came back too, I was just like, oh my God, if he did that to me, what was he doing to my friend? Mm. See, as an adult, I can say that now. Like, oh, my Jesus. If he did that to me, what in the world was he doing to my friend?
Or anybody else that came over,
anybody
nieces.
Else. Because so many times we are taught that everything is a secret anyway. It's a secret. It's a secret. We keep so many secrets, but that's why we're so bound, because we have so many secrets. And so then we're walking around in fear. That's all we're walking around in is fear.
What happens in the house stays.
Yeah, and so you're terrified. You're scared. But we have to not be afraid. You know, and so, hey, I can talk about it now. Because why? I'm free. And, you know, I can definitely express to other women and ladies to know that it is okay. You know, that it happens. You know what I'm saying? But it doesn't have to continue to change who you are. You know what I'm saying? If you're willing to look at things differently. And so just at that moment, I think because I was so broken and I used to pray, Lord, I'm scared to kill myself. If you would just kill me, we'll be good. And that used to be a prayer that I prayed. Because I just didn't want to be here, but I was scared to kill myself because I was like, if I kill myself, you know, in church you talk, if you kill yourself, you can't go to heaven, right? You're going to hell. So I was like, how about, hey, if you kill me or somebody else, so I was doing risky stuff, just stupid stuff, because I didn't want to be here, you know? So you do things, you know, because you be like, I don't want to be here. You know, and so I actually began to find my purpose, you know, and so even now, like the church that I go to, our apostle, he always says that, you know, the reason why you still here is because you have purpose. And that really hits me because there was a time where I did not want to be here, you know, because I didn't think I had purpose. You know, I don't even know why I'm here. Everything is crazy. You know what I'm saying? Hey, I can barely touch my son. I feel like if I touch him, I'm going to like him. Or I'm going to touch him inappropriately. Or is anybody going to know that you know what I'm saying? Like, I just didn't know what was going on. You know, so you have those moments and feelings. And so I can definitely say it. You know, I can definitely, you know, say I love my son and I don't. Ew. I mean, you know what I'm saying? And I didn't love on him, but that was what the enemy wanted to do. He put that fear in. And so when I was able to go back and deal with it, then my life began to change. You know what I'm saying? And that's when deliverance began to take place. You know, and then I had to deal with everything that was attached to it, everything that came along with it. You know, because along the way, I just didn't like people. And so I had to be like, Lord, can I love the people, please? You know, I like the clients better than I like the people, you know? And so I had to ask God to help me. You know, I didn't smile. I never smiled. And I smile now. I never used to smile. If you ask friends who I went to college with, undergrad, they would be like, "Who? She's so mean. You just had to get to know her." And my thing was, you know, you don't have to like me. I don't care. Because I probably don't like you. And then I would tell you that I don't like you. And then tell you everything about you. You know what I'm saying?
That doesn't
but
sound like me.
God had to deal with me. You know what I'm saying? He had to deal with just all of those things. And he had to deal with the rage that I had just from the whole situation on top of the generational stuff. You know what I'm saying? Because, you know, my father was present, but he wasn't present. But if I even begin to tell the story about my grandmother or my grandfather or even, you know, the anger that they experienced and the things that they did, I mean, it's in me. So I need to have some forgiveness before I kill somebody. And that's just kind of where I was because I was clear on, you know, plotting to end lives. I was because that's where I was. I just wasn't the nicest person. And in my mind, you will never get a chance to hurt me first.
Wow. Well, we are going to take a brief break. We will be right back. Give us about 10 minutes. We'll be right back. Less than that. About 5.
Okay.
Cool. It's about 5 minutes. We'll be right back. Oh,
There's a question.
one more. We'll come right back and do the question. Be right back.
Okay.
Oh, we have 2. Okay.
2.
We out, Tyler?
And we out.
That was good. Yay. That was great.
Like I'm telling you, I'm a